If you've spent years working in ArcGIS or a traditional GIS ecosystem, the good news is you've already mastered the hard part, which is spatial thinking. But if you want to make the leap into a modern, cloud-native geospatial workflow, you need to know about how the pieces fit together, where to start, and the path you need to go down. And that's what we're going to cover in this video, how to think about building a modern GIS infrastructure from scratch. I'm going to lay out the clear roadmap in 8 different steps that you can take to start from the base and build up and expand over time depending on your different needs and understand how these pieces really fit together. Now, I want to reassure you, you're not starting from scratch, right? You're building on top of a knowledge base you already know. And a lot of these first steps are going to feel really familiar. So I really hope to guide you through that and understand all these different pieces and how they fit and how you can apply that to your own career. But let's get started with step 1. And the first one is just to add a basic GIS tool, right? You can start with ArcGIS or QGIS, but basically this is the thing you're already doing. It gives you a system to look at spatial data, inspect it, manipulate it, do basic analysis, and create maps from it just all in one place. And QGIS and ArcGIS are really fully functioned systems to do just that, right? This is probably something you're already doing. So if you work with a desktop GIS, you're already a big part of the way there. I'm not going to explain about how each of these systems works. If you're coming to this in the first time from somewhere else, I have a video here on QGIS that explains how to do that, some other tutorials as well as a video on ArcGIS that kind of explains how both of these things fit in. But if you're just getting started, all you need is a QGIS system that's for free, or if you have access to ArcGIS, you can start with that too. This will get you a lot of the way there. You can do some basic things, build some workflows, and build some maps. But as your data starts to scale, you're going to increasingly add more data, and you might be manipulating data, adjusting it, and at a certain point, files don't become enough. If you're saving those to files, you're going to lose the history, you might have something break, and you want to be able to keep that in one single place. Maybe even collaborate with others. That's where you need to add a transactional database. Now, the database I recommend is using PostGIS. PostGIS basically replaces local files. It allows you to store raster and vector data all in one place. You can run that locally if you're just getting started, or you can deploy that in the cloud quite easily. But now you have a safe, secure place that keeps your data, keeps a history and record of that data. You can also give access to other people so that they can do that. There's, if someone makes an edit over here, you'll be able to see that next time you pull your data in. So it creates a system that you're not passing and shifting files back and forth. That can get really messy really quickly. So now you have a full database that you can work off of. Now, there are other databases that you can use. Lots of databases have a spatial functionality in them. So if you can't deploy PostGIS, you can use things like MySQL, some proprietary systems like Oracle Spatial. So one thing that might differ from what you're used to here is you might add like a server system, right? If you think of like there's Esri server or, like file layers or GeoServer, stuff like that. I generally don't recommend that here because if you're working with data, you want to have a database that can update and save those things. Now, a server layer traditionally keeps files just in a separate location as a server. And there are some like transactional pieces there, but it also adds like functionality for like web map viewers and stuff like that. In the new stack, we don't usually need things like a web map service or stuff like that, or a feature service or anything like that. So traditionally, I don't recommend that here. This is where you might traditionally add something like that, but here I'd recommend starting with a database because there's other ways that you can do that. Now, let's say you've added a bunch of data and now all of a sudden you're starting to query larger and larger volumes of data. Maybe it's getting too big for what you're trying to do. This is where you need to bring in an analytical system. Both a database like PostGIS and an analytical system use SQL to query or basically interact with the data. The difference between a database is meant to handle those inserts and updates and deletes when you change a file, you're adding new data in or things like that. It's really good at doing stuff like that. Analytical queries allow you to do things like, look over lots of data and aggregate that, maybe like count the number of points in a polygon, or maybe do some advanced processing like find the k nearest neighbors to a certain point. And questions like this allow you to do that much more efficiently here. And the tools I recommend for this are SedonaDB. It's purpose-built for spatial, so it really has all these spatial operations. Or if you need spatial plus other operations, you can use DuckDB as well, which is another system to do that in. Now, both these work off of different services. They can pull this directly from files, and you could use file systems, which we'll talk about in a minute, or it can actually connect into different things like PostGIS, so you can connect to data there. So if you have some files you're using plus some data in a database, this is a really nice piece in between that. Now, you need to know how to write SQL to do this as well, but you will for a database anyways. So this is where you kind of add some SQL functionality, and this will allow you to scale to much larger volumes of data, even just locally on your computer. Now, if you need to add more service to this, there are cloud-based systems that can do this as well. So things like a data warehouse might fit in here, but you can kind of decide what that means for your different system and how scalable you need to go. There's a full video on SedonaDB here if you want to check that out and learn a little bit about how to use that and how it compares to some other systems that I mentioned earlier. But now you might start to see your data volume increasing, and increasingly you might not want to store all that data in a database. A database needs to be running 24/7 for someone to access it, and as you add more data, you just need to add more storage. So maybe you want to offload some of that data or have analytical ready formats in a cheaper version. That's where cloud storage comes in. Now you can start to add and store some of your data in cloud storage in cloud native formats. Now, a cloud storage is basically what we call a cloud bucket, where you can dump a lot of data to. Basically everything on the web lives in a cloud bucket in some way, shape, or form. It gives you security and permissions, but it basically just stores the data. It doesn't do anything else, right? It allows you to keep it there cheaply, and then you can stream that into other systems. Like I said, the analytical queries can actually read directly from cloud storage, so you can query that data there, and you can pull it into PostGIS should you need to. But this allows you to keep like a system of record for current data in PostGIS, handle all your updates and inserts and deletes. You can offload historical data into the bucket, and generally you want to store those in cloud native geospatial formats or CNG formats. That's things like GeoParquet, cloud optimized GeoTIFF, there's cloud optimized point cloud, as well as for tiling you can add PM tiles. These are formats that you can do. It's a little bit more of the bottom layer, so we're building this a little bit differently than you might if you were just building from scratch, but this allows you to build that as need increases, right? Now, on top of this, you might also want to add a cataloging service that adds some history or some similar to the transactional database functions in PostGIS. You can see who's added data, go roll back to historical versions, do all this different stuff right from that. And that includes things like Apache Iceberg, that includes a spatiotemporal asset catalog for raster data, as well as IceChunk that works on array-based or climate data. So now you have storage, you have a system of record to understand what's in that storage with the catalog that can connect into the analytical queries. Those analytical queries can pull data from your database, and your desktop GIS can do a lot of these manipulations and basic visualizations. So now if you're now collecting more and more data, you don't want to be the one pressing the button to move that data around. Now you want to build a data pipeline. That's where tools like Airflow come in, and that allows you to do an orchestration pipeline that can run in the background, maybe look for data updates, see if this file's been updated over here, pull that in, and start to move that into cloud native formats and bring that into the system as well. So really you can, if you're coming from a traditional background, you can think of this as like an FME or maybe even like a model builder where you're collecting data from one format and it moves it through this graph that you've designed, which is exactly what Airflow does. It's all in Python, so it can do all of that, connects into these different systems. So if it connects in, you want to pull it into a database, you can do that. If you want to pull it into cloud storage, you can do it there. Now it creates this other system, so there's automation happening. You're moving a gear and cranking data into this, so you're collecting it all the time, so you don't have to think about it. Now that you've done all that, your data might be getting big, right? You need to have some processing to make those queries work more efficiently. Maybe the cloud storage does get too big, your analytical queries are taking longer, all these different things can start to be taking place. That's where you need to add some processing, right? And that's a processing layer that's specifically orchestrated to do that really efficiently. Now, Apache Sedona is one of the best ways to do that. You can do it similarly with things like Databricks, or Wherebots is a cloud-hosted version of Sedona, so you can use that. And then there's different tools here that you can use as well. So if you're looking for one that works across all data types, Apache Sedona is going to be the best bet. Works across raster, vector, as well as some of the climate-based data formats as well, like NetCDF. And effectively what it does is it distributes the computation. If you think of it like an assembly line, right? You have this really big data problem. It splits it up into smaller parts, runs those in parallel. So it will split them into 10 parts, and it does each of those 10 parts and reassembles it on the end. And there's a lot of ways that happens. If you want to learn a lot about Apache Sedona, go over here and watch this video. That gives you some full details on it. But effectively, it allows you to process that data really efficiently and use the compute or the processing power most efficiently. So instead of waiting for one process to run for like an hour, or I've heard people waiting on processes to run a day, they'll split that up efficiently and it'll shut down when you need it. So that's a really great way to handle that. And specifically platforms like Wherebots and Sedona fit in with Airflow really nicely. So you can process that data, they publish out to cloud native formats. So you're actually addressing that and using a process called like a multi-hop architecture. You can really create some scalable data sets that go into cloud storage and allow lots of people to access them. So now you've gone all the way back down, you have the processing pieces and you're ready to go. But now you actually have to publish data to the cloud and people need to visualize realize that, and your data might be getting too big, which is the whole reason why we had web map services. Your data was too big just to render in the desktop GIS. Where does that leave you and what you should do? Well, there's this great cloud native format called PM tiles, and it is a really easy way to create a tile set, which is basically what a web map service is. There's a little bit, complexity there. A tile is basically one layer of data, whereas a web map service, you can smash multiple layers together, but this allows you to do that in a modern vector format. So you can publish this vector format, you have it ready to go, and it basically lives on cloud storage, right? You don't have to add any server backend. There's no extra things to stand up. Tools like Whereabouts can actually publish in PM tiles, and increasingly you can read that as a layer into your base GIS anyways. So that allows you to go even deeper there. And PM tiles work great moving up the stack as well, which is our final step, which is to integrate into cloud GIS systems, analytical systems, business intelligence systems, and Python applications as well. So all these data sets that you've prepped or these tiles that you've created, they can fit into this top layer here really nicely. If you need to pull that into an analytics system, here you can see some of the different tools that are available, or a business intelligence system like Apache Superset, you can see exactly how that fits in here. You can bring your layers in, you can query them from any of these different systems, and now they're there. You can bring it into a desktop GIS like we already have, or a web GIS. Things like Felt and Atlas and NextGIS all do this really well. If you need to build that into a application, build a full stack application, maybe that's using things like Mapbox or DuckGL or MapLibre, you can build a full version of that here, or you can build them into Python workflows. People can query data from your analytical database, or maybe directly from your PostGIS database. You can build that here and serve all these different needs. And now you've basically built this full stack, right? Starting right at our desktop GIS, you've added these different steps and kind of understood some of the basic decision points that you might want to add these different pieces in. Now, you may reach some of these different benchmarks at different times, and you may need to add them earlier rather than the exact order that I said here. This is kind of this general roadmap, right? There's a lot of pieces you need to build together here to make it work, but I hope this helped it break it down in terms of some of these individual pieces. And I want to be clear, this isn't about abandoning the way we've done GIS. All these things have existed in different formats, right? If we had, our desktop GIS is not changing. When we add a database that works much like a server, if you need to add analytical queries, that's like your geoprocessing engine or ArcPy or something like that. Using cloud storage is no more different than moving into, a web layer or something like that. Data pipelines and orchestration existed for a long time. Publishing data to the cloud and creating tile services, that's a web map service. Handling big data and increasing your processing, that's just, some of these different engines that can do that at scale. And then building applications in WebGIS or, applications with JavaScript, this has all existed for a long time. This just allows us to have a lot more control over these different pieces that you're doing, and you can do it layer by layer. You don't have to do it all at once. And now you have the ability to build it as you need to scale there. So I hope this video helped you break down how to actually develop and build a modern GIS system. I built a bunch of different videos in this series that talk about these, as well as a bunch of technology explainers. If you want to check those out, I've referenced those in this video, as well as the past videos, and there's some playlists that kind of talk through some of these different things. So if you're interested, check those out. And if you want to learn more, go ahead and sign up for our newsletter. I publish a lot of information about this stuff to help you understand how to fit all these pieces together. So I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.